Text by S.E. Hinton. Day 1. There ain't no bear in that bush, I said. Negrito's ears were pricked so far forward they almost touched, and he was picking up his feet like he was walking on eggshells. You've never even seen a bear, you dumb horse, I told him, keeping a strong leg on him. You don't even know what one looks like. Negrito blew through his nose, rolling one eye toward the bush. I laughed. Negrito had a good imagination. A sudden gust of wind rustled the bush, and Negrito gave a snort and a huge sideways leap and tried to take off. I kept him back long enough to let him know it was my idea to gallop. Then we went. The drumming of his hooves was better than music. There's a ditch coming up, man, I said. I could tell by the way he was holding his head up that he saw it. Do you want to jump it or not? I felt him weave a little, so I leaned back and pushed, tightening my leg. Sure you do. We soared over the ditch without breaking stride, but once we landed, he bobbed his head and bucked a little. Boy, that was fun. You're a great jumper. A really great jumper, I said, slapping his neck with the reins. Next year, we make the Olympics. Then, worried I sounded too sarcastic, I added, for a cow horse, you are a really good jumper. We loped on. This was the first day I could really feel fall coming on. Not so much because it was chilly, but there was a slant to the sunlight and a smell in the air that meant fall. Pop ought to be coming home pretty soon. Summer, shoot. There were lots of rodeos going on, lots of places he could be all summer, but fall would be a really good time for him to come home. Negrito jumped sideways and started bucking again. Geez, it's a rabbit, for Pete's sake. Don't you know a rabbit when you see one? Negrito shook his head. I got him collected till he was bunched up like a coiled spring, and his canter felt like a rocking chair. He was just playing around. He was a pretty brave horse. Actually, fall always made him feel good. Besides that, I hadn't ridden him for a while. My best friend, Johnny Collins, got a motorcycle for his birthday a month ago, and I'd been spending a lot of time dirt biking with him. I slowed Negrito down to a walk to cool him off. I had to get back and change clothes before I went to school, and I couldn't leave him hot. He kept breaking into a jog trot. Fall mornings, he could go forever. I've been wasting a lot of time with that cycle, I said, while I was unsaddling him. But it was new and everything, and Johnny kept pestering me to go with him. But we'll go out for rides more. Negrito turned and nipped at me. Sometimes he meant it, but mostly he'd just catch my sleeve or jacket. I slipped the bridle over his ears. He almost knocked me down trying to scratch his head on my arm. The bit always made his mouth itch. See you later. I swung over the fence. Negrito stood there, waiting. Okay. I pulled the last piece of carrot out of my pocket and gave it to him. Then I just walked off because I never could convince him that I didn't have any more carrots. Across the paddock, my brother, Mason's horse, Red, stood swishing flies, looking bored out of his mind. Mason had never treated him like a person, so Red had never acted like one. Mason was a pretty good rider, though. Not as good as me. Even Papa did that. A couple of years ago, when me and Mason did junior rodeos a lot, I always won more. I barely had time to change my clothes before Johnny drove up on his cycle. It was a lot better way to get to school than on the bus. Mason always left early for school, so I hardly ever would catch a ride with him. I hopped on the cycle. Riding double was against the law since neither of us was 16, but that was kind of a dumb law. I don't go around trying to break laws, but I couldn't get real worried about that one. It was one of those long days at school. When it was over, I met Johnny. Straight home today, I told him. Come on, Tex. I was going to go to the gravel pits today. No way, man. This is a perfect day for horse riding. Listen, man, I'll let you drive. Johnny tried bribing me. Nope. Well, hang on. Johnny did a wheelie, leaving the school grounds, and the principal saw him do it. I knew we'd both get sent to the office tomorrow. I get sent to the office quite a bit, even more than Johnny. You can't do a wheelie on a horse, Johnny shouted over the engine. That's true, I yelled back. He was right there. You can teach a horse to rear up, but that is the worst dumb trick you can teach a horse. Lord knows enough of them come up with it on their own. One quick way to get killed is having a rearing horse come down backward on top of you. Hang on, I'm going to jump the ditch, Johnny shouted. I tightened my grip on his belt. The cycle flew through the air, bounded, skidded, and slid to the sideways stop in front of our house. I swung off the back end. Thanks for the ride. Johnny took off his helmet to wipe the sweat off his freckles. Everybody else in his family was either real dark like their mother or real blonde like their father. And there Johnny sat, flame-haired as a matchstick. He always said he was a throwback. A throwback is like when you breed a chestnut to a black and get an albino colt like its great-grandfather. I read a book once where that happened. All the Collins had dark blue eyes, though. It was their trademark. You sure you don't want to go to the pits with me? Not today. All I want to hear on a day like this is hoofbeats. Negrito is going to love a good run. Now, just who is your best friend, me or that horse?" I looked at him for a minute, thinking about it. "Well, let me see. I've known both of you about the same amount of time." Johnny belted me in the stomach with his helmet. "Hey," he said suddenly, "what's Mason doing home?" I looked at our beat-up pickup sitting in the driveway. Huh? Maybe he decided not to practice today. It's a little while till basketball season's really going anyway. But him and Bob were meeting after school to shoot baskets. He's probably out jogging. Mace ain't making a move that doesn't have basketball behind it. "Shoot," said Johnny. "If I could get the city paper to come out and take pictures of me, I might give up this machine and jog myself. Wouldn't do you any good. The coaches won't take midgets." Johnny rapped me with the helmet again, but he wasn't mad. If he minded about being short, I wouldn't tease him about it, but nothing much bothered Johnny. I'm the same way. "You ought to see our room," I said. "Old Mason has the walls papered with that picture. Come on in and have a Kool-Aid." Johnny shook his head. "I want to get some biking in before I have to go home. I'm trying to keep it down to just an hour late." Cole started making noises about taking my cycle keys away. All the Collins kids called their parents by their first names. They were the only kids I knew who did that. Johnny put his helmet back on. "See you, Tex." He popped another wheelie going across the yard. "Way to go," I hollered after him. I went on in the house to change jeans before I went riding. I kept my jeans sorted by clean, sort of dirty, and real dirty. It saved trips to the laundry. The ones I had on could go a couple days as sort of dirty, so I needed some real dirty ones to ride in. "Mace, you home?" I yelled from the bedroom. The whole house was quiet. The next place I headed was the kitchen. We have a real little house. White wood frame, a front room with one bedroom on the side, a kitchen right behind the front room. The bathroom is through the bedroom. There's an attic bedroom upstairs, but it's so hot in the summer and cold in the winter that Pop never uses it when he's here. But he puts a sleeping bag on the living room sofa. I was hunting through the icebox for something to eat when I saw something just out of the corner of my eye. I almost jumped halfway across the room. Turned out it was just Mason, sitting quiet in the corner behind the table. "Boy, you sure spooked me. What are you doing there?" "What does it look like?" Mason is a pretty sarcastic person. I don't pay any attention. That's just the way he is. He sounds meaner than he is. "We got anything to eat?" "There's some bologna left." I found the bologna and a jar with some mustard left in it and pulled the chair around to face him. "What you doing home so early?" "I cut school today." I stopped scraping the mustard jar, astounded. "You kidding? Mr. Super Study cutting school? I guess that makes it okay for me to skip a day." "I guess it don't." Mason is 17, a couple of 3 years older than me. Most of the time, he seems even older than that. He's got into the habit of bossing me around. I don't know where he gets that. Pop never bosses us around. I just let Mason rattle on and don't pay much attention. That's just the way he is. He's always hollering or preaching about something. "You go fishing?" I asked. Mason loves to go fishing. That's about the only time he unwinds. He didn't have much time for it anymore. "No, I didn't go fishing." He was looking real strange, sitting there behind the table. He was too quiet. Neither one of us is quiet people. "Thought I told you to stay off Johnny's cycle." He didn't have any expression in his voice. "No, you didn't. You said I'd get myself killed riding Johnny's cycle. You didn't say to keep off it." "Do I have to write everything down in letters 3 feet high and shove it under your nose? I wouldn't ride in a car if Johnny Collins was driving." Now, see, Mace says stuff like that he don't mean. He liked Johnny all right. Johnny's older brother Bob was Mason's best buddy. Even their sister Jamie thought of us as a couple of extra brothers, even though she already had 4. He knew I'd been riding with Johnny ever since he got the bike. He just decided now it would be a good time to fuss about it. I just went on spreading mustard on the bologna and eating it. We were out of bread. "We get any mail?" I set the empty mustard jar down on the table. "Who'd be writing to us?" "Pop. He never writes." "Sure he does. We got a card not too long ago." 4 months ago. "Yeah, it don't seem that long ago. He's only been gone 5. I guess he'll be coming home pretty soon now that the rodeos are mostly over. Maybe I'll go with him next year." "I wouldn't count on any invitations if I were you," Mason said distinctly. It was true. Pop never had asked us to go along. But shoot, maybe he would next year. I looked at Mason again. Something about the way he was sitting there made me think he'd been like that for hours, just sitting and staring. "It sure is cold in here." I was beginning to wish I had left my jacket on. "A guy came out and turned off the heat this morning. I haven't paid the gas bill lately." "No kidding? Why not?" Mason just looked at me like I was the dumbest thing on earth. We run out of money? I asked. What happened to all that money we made last summer? Mason gave me a real mean look, almost like he hated me. He gave me a jab in the gut, even though I was pretty sure he didn't mean it. I blew it all on my fun-filled week at Acapulco. Where do you think it went? Food, gas, clothes. How far do you think a couple of $100 stretches? Maybe if you took paying customers instead of mowing lawns for free. I ignored that. I only did a couple of lawns for free, and everybody else paid me. Mason likes to make a big deal out of little things. I've just learned to live with it. Well, what are we doing about it? I asked him. We, he said, more sarcastic than ever, have already taken care of it. The heat will be back on tomorrow. We don't have to worry about it anymore. When Pop was gone, Mason took care of all the bills and business stuff. I didn't know nothing about them. He did. I never thought it bothered him. He was the kind of person who liked to run things anyway. I decided to change the subject. Talking about money always got Mace irritated. He hates being poor. I heard you broke up with Lori. Mason was a very private person. He was a fanatic about keeping his personal life personal. Unfortunately, you can't be the school basketball ace and keep your personal life personal. I figured if the whole school knew something, there wasn't any reason why I had to play ignorant. She was getting too serious, talking marriage. Yeah? Scared you off, huh? You'll end up married one of these days, though. Not in the near future. Anyway, it's none of your business. Boy, somebody sure put a burr under your blanket. Anyway, Lem Peters says being married ain't so bad once you get used to it. I wouldn't mind Mason getting married to tell the truth. At least that'd take his mind off college. That was all I thought about, college and how to get there. Unless Pop came home, I wasn't too crazy about him going off to college and leaving me here by myself. Lem Peters better like being married. He's going to be stuck with it for a while. Just because you have to do something don't mean you can't like it too. You know he wanted to get married besides having to. I glanced at the clock. I better go get the horses rounded up. It's going to be too dark to ride pretty soon. Anyway, if they ain't fed on time, they'll be tearing the fence down. I was halfway to the kitchen door when Mace said, "They ain't there." "Yeah?" I said. "Where are they?" I thought maybe he had turned them loose in the next pasture, even though since Cole Collins was leasing it for his cows, we weren't supposed to keep the horses in it. We'd been running low on hay lately, though, with most of the grass in the half-acre paddock gone. "I sold them," Mason said. I just kept looking at him, waiting for the punchline. I knew he didn't sell Negrito. "No, you didn't," I said finally. He was lying or kidding or crazy. I was getting a sick, cold feeling. "Yeah, I did. Got a good price for them, too." I didn't believe him. He couldn't sell Negrito any more than he could sell me. But just to make sure, I ran out the back door, jumped down the back steps, and raced out to the barn. It was just a little lean-to, really. It'd been part of a barn once, but the rest of it had kind of fallen apart. If I was ever late feeding the horses, they'd start trotting up and down the fence, nickering. Nothing made Negrito madder than being fed late. He'd pace the fence, his head getting lower and lower till his nose would be practically dragging on the ground. Then, when he saw me, he'd paw and stamp and say, "Where the heck have you been?" He had a real thing about his food. Neither horse was in sight. I whistled. Nobody answered. I ran up the little hill that led to the Collins big pasture. Even across 30 acres, I can tell horses from cows. They weren't in the pasture. I felt really strange, like I'd swallowed a block of ice and it was just sitting in my gut, sending cold waves around me. My head felt spacey, almost like it was going to go floating off my body. I walked back to the house. I was breathing funny. I couldn't get enough air. "Mace," I said. He still sat behind the table like he hadn't moved a muscle since I left, and he didn't even blink now. I gave him one last chance. "Where's them horses?" "I told you I sold them. I don't know why you'd think I'd start lying to you this late in life. Don't you ever close doors? No wonder I can't pay the gas bill." "Who'd you sell them to?" "I won't tell you. Nobody you know. Anyway, they've got good homes. I made sure of that. They're gone. Shut up about it." I was walking around and around in circles. I couldn't think. I couldn't breathe. I started shaking and sweating like a horse being reined in and spurred at the same time. "Mason!" My voice shot up a note or two. "You better get those horses back. I mean it, man." Mason just sat there and didn't move. It was like seeing a stranger wearing a mask of my brother. "I ain't getting them back," he spoke softly, his teeth clenched. "They're gone, and they're gonna stay gone. We couldn't feed them through the winter. I wasn't going to watch them starve to death, so just shut up." "You better get those horses back," I shouted. I picked up one of the jelly jars we used for glasses and slammed it against the wall. Mason jumped a little when it shattered, like he hadn't expected it to break. I couldn't stop moving, and I grabbed the mustard jar and hurled it at the window. It crashed through the glass and knocked the screen loose. "Texas," Mason said. "You better quit." "I want those horses back." I grabbed another jar and smashed it into the sink, breaking a few dirty dishes. Mason shoved the table out of the way and came charging across the room. My mind went into a white-hot blanket and I went crazy. All I wanted to do was kill him. And even though I was landing a few punches, I didn't seem to be hurting him, which made me madder. We rolled on the floor through the broken glass. I was out to get him any way I could, biting, kicking, screaming, and cussing. He got me pinned by one shoulder and slammed his fist into my face. It was like getting kicked in the head by a horse. I couldn't see for the yellow sparklers in my head. And he let me have another one. For the first time, I realized he was as mad as I was and crazy enough to kill me. I blocked the next punch with my arm and turned my head quick as a snake and bit into his other arm. I set my jaw and wouldn't turn loose. Mason was swearing and slamming me across the face, and when that didn't knock me loose, he rolled off and brought his fist down hard in the middle of my stomach. I gasped for air, doubling up. I couldn't move. I lay there waiting for him to finish me off while I couldn't breathe. Mason just sat there holding his arm, panting. When I was sure he had quit the fight, I turned over and lay face down, my head resting on my arm. I was hurting real bad. All my energy was gone. I think if the house had been on fire, I wouldn't have had the strength to leave. I was crying and too tired to keep from it. "Tex?" I didn't move. He took hold of my shoulder easy to let me know he wasn't fighting anymore, but I jerked loose. "Look, I didn't mean to." "Darn it, Tex. I just want to see if you're hurt." "I ain't hurt." My voice sounded weird. I think it was because I couldn't breathe through my nose. I stayed still, waiting to get my strength back, trying to make some sense out of what happened. I couldn't figure out what had happened. "Look at Tex. It wasn't you. I mean, I didn't aim to take it out on you like that." I didn't know what he was talking about, and I didn't care. "I'm going to get my horse back," I said. "Pop wouldn't let you sell these horses if he were here." "Pop isn't here," Mason shouted. "Can't you get it through your thick skull that all this happened because Pop isn't here?" I flinched a little. For a second I thought I felt his hand on the back of my hair. Then he muttered, "Well, heck." Pretty soon I heard the back door slam and the pickup engine start. He'd go drive up and down the highway for a while. He always did that when he was mad. I couldn't seem to stop crying. I cried because I was hurting and because I wanted to kill Mace, and he was my only brother, and I didn't really want to kill him. I cried because Mason had never beaten me up before. Mostly we got along pretty good. Finally I thought about Negrito being gone and Pop being gone, and I bawled like a baby. I never cried much before, and I wasn't used to it, and I didn't know how to stop. I sat up after a while, wiping the tears off my face with my sleeve. Blood came off with them. A back tooth had come loose, so I went ahead and pulled it. It was one I was going to lose anyway. The kitchen looked like a wreck, with the broken window and shattered glass all over, the table turned over and blood splattered around. It was a real mess. I didn't like looking at it. I got to my feet. I hurt all over. When I was helping Lem Peters break his Appaloosa colt, I got thrown probably 10 times a day, and never felt this bad. I was shaking. I stumbled to the john to look in the mirror. I looked like Donald Duck. My nose and mouth were swollen, my lower lip cut. I didn't look much better after I washed the blood off. One side of my face was darkened to purple. My left eye was swollen shut. If it had been Halloween, I could have got by without a mask. I wanted to change to a clean shirt, but I didn't have one, so I changed to one that at least didn't have any blood on it. It smelled like horse, and almost set me off crying again. I walked around in the front room for a few minutes slowly. It hurt to be moving, but I couldn't sit still. I kept trying to think of what to do next. Finally, I put on my jacket and started down the road. It was getting dark. Once in a while, a car would whiz by, but nobody stopped. Mostly, it was quiet, except for a whippoorwill that I finally left behind. I walked as fast as I could, but once in a while, I'd get a good pain wave that would slow me up for a second. I heard the cycle coming up behind me. When I was thinking about other things, when it stopped and a voice said, "Tex," I couldn't even remember who I knew that had a cycle. "Where are you going?" I stopped and stared at Johnny and his sister Jamie like I'd never seen them before. Good Lord. Jamie swung off the back end of the cycle to take a better look at me. "What happened to you?" It seemed like so much time had passed since I'd seen Johnny last. I was surprised he didn't look older. "Tex." Johnny hopped off the cycle to push it alongside me. "What's wrong?" I kept on walking. "Mason sold the horses and beat me up, and I'm going to find them." "Tonight?" "You know where they are?" "Nope, but I'm going to keep looking till I find them." A car drove by and slowed down, curious-like, then drove on. Johnny and Jamie practically had to trot to keep up with me. I'm pretty long-legged. "Tex, you're being crazy. You can't just walk around the countryside till you find the horses," Jamie said. Want to bet? Your front door is open and you left the lights on, Johnny said, like that was real important. I could tell that they thought I'd flipped out. You're going home later, though, Johnny asked. Tonight? Not till I find the horses. Look, Tex, you can't sleep out here on the road. I ain't sleepy. Listen, Johnny said, I'll take Jamie home and come back for you, okay? I turned to face them. Can't you two understand English? I said I'm looking for Negrito. Now get lost. They were shocked. I'm not a bad-tempered person mostly. In fact, mostly I'm real easygoing. Standing still was making me shiver again, so I started on. Tex? Johnny gave it one more try. Johnny, wait, Jamie said. They had stopped and I was too far down the road to hear what they were saying. Pretty soon the cycle started up again and I headed back in the other direction. I was glad they were gone. I liked them both, but I had things to think about. Every time I passed a pasture with horses, I'd stop and look. I know Negrito in the dark, but I was pretty sure Mason wouldn't have sold them to anybody close by. He knew I'd just go get them back. Well, it didn't matter where they were. I'd still get them back. Another car came by, slowed down, and stopped. I looked over, figuring to tell the driver I didn't need a ride when I recognized the truck. I started running. The door slammed. I hadn't got far when Mason pulled me up by my jacket. Get in the truck, he said. My heart was pounding so hard I could barely hear him. No, I said. I was shaking not from being scared of him, just shaking for no particular reason. Mason must have thought he was causing it because he let go of my jacket. But when I didn't move, he said, I'll tie you up and throw you in that truck, Tex. I can't stand being tied up. Even when I was a little kid playing cowboys and horses, I couldn't stand being tied up. It made me sick. Mason knew that. He wouldn't do that to me, but I never thought he'd pound on me either. I walked past him to the truck. I wasn't about to sit up front with him. I climbed into the truck bed and leaned back against the cab. I thought I was all cried out, but tears kept running down my face. The wind dried them up real quick, though. When we pulled into the driveway, I hopped over the side before the truck stopped. Johnny's cycle was parked in the yard. I figured he and Jamie would be inside, waiting to see if I got home. I had one last thing to say to Mason. You can't keep chasing me down all the time. I'll just go looking for them again tomorrow. Mason came around to my side of the truck. Apparently, he stopped at the Safeway while he'd been driving around because he started hauling out sacks of groceries. You can leave for Timbuktu tomorrow for all I care, he said, but you're not going to find the horses and you're not going to give me any more trouble tonight. Now shut up and take some of these sacks. Now, while Mason had always been a sarcastic person, he'd never been out and mean before. It was hard to believe that I was hearing what I was hearing. I almost told him that he could do what he could do with the sacks. Then a bruise on my face gave a big throb, and I decided to keep quiet. I took a couple of sacks of food and went on in the house. I hadn't seen that much food altogether that one place for a long time, and I wondered where Mason got the money. Then I remembered, and almost dropped the bags. Johnny and Jamie were sitting on the floor in the front room playing cards. Johnny jumped up to push open the door for me. His mouth fell open. I reckon I looked a lot worse than in the light. Did Mason? His voice trailed off as Mace came in behind me. I marched to the kitchen, slammed the bags down on the counter, and marched out, kicking an overturned chair out of my way. Thank goodness for the Collins. I wasn't looking forward to being alone in that house with Mason. I sat down on the floor with him. Deal me in. I think you ought to call the cops, Jamie said. Our house is so small, Mason could probably hear her, even in the kitchen. Have Mason arrested for assault and battery. I just shook my head. I stared at the hand I was dealt, kept a 3, and threw away a pair of jacks. I wasn't exactly in prime poker form. I could hear Mason cleaning up the broken glass and stuff in the kitchen. I couldn't tell if I felt worse about him or losing Negrito, and I swear if the Collins hadn't been there, I would have started in bawling again. Footsteps sounded in the front porch, and Bob Collins, Johnny and Jamie's older brother, stuck his head in the door. Hey, Johnny. Tex, what happened to you? He came on in. I didn't look up. Jamie said, Why don't you ask the child abuser? He's in there. She jerked a thumb toward the kitchen. Bob looked at me uneasily. Mason didn't do that. Robert, Mason called from the kitchen. Come here a second. Sometimes Mason called Bob Robert. He was the only person who did that. Bob didn't like to be called Robert. He took a lot off Mason, though. By the way, Bob called, Cole's looking for you two. I have the feeling there's going to be some butts blistered. Ah, Bobby, why didn't you say so? Johnny frowned. His father would still want them one if he thought Johnny needed it, and hardly a week went by that Jamie didn't get spanked or grounded or both. Bob, being 17, could get away with more. Let's get going, Johnny said, picking up his helmet. Oh, We are going to get it anyway, so we might as well stay. If Cole finds us here, we're dead ducks. Cole Collins didn't like his kids hanging around me and Mason. He thought we were bad influences. He might have found out Pop had been in prison once too, but I wasn't sure. I never told anybody, not even Johnny. Mason said he'd skin me if I did, but Cole might have found out anyway. There were a lot worse people than me and Mason, but you couldn't tell Cole that. He judged a lot by money, and we sure didn't have any. I want to make sure Mason's through beating up on people for the night, Jamie said. I looked over at her and realized I liked the way she cut her hair. It looked like somebody had put a bowl over her head and cut around it. She had almost black hair. It looked good with blue eyes. What could you do about it if he isn't? Johnny said. I don't like my friends getting pounded on. He's my friend, Johnny said. My friend too, Jamie said. I felt kind of dumb sitting there being talked about like a dog or something. I was real tired too. I felt like I had a headache all over. Mason, or maybe you better go home, I said. I don't want you guys to get into trouble. Yeah, Jamie, if we get grounded this week, we can't go to the fair. Well, okay, just wait a minute. Jamie went to the door of the kitchen. If you ever hit Tex again, I don't know what she was going to threaten him with. Mace just cut her off short. He said something he doesn't really say to girls, but with 4 brothers, I doubt that it was anything Jamie hadn't heard before. And Bob said patiently, Jamie, go home. All right, come on, Johnny, let me drive, huh? Cole said you weren't supposed to. Cole, she said sarcastically, is not here. You don't exactly knock yourself out to obey his every rule anyway. Girls, Johnny began, and Jamie snapped. You give me any of that garbage and I'll make you sorry. Johnny gulped in a mock fright, but handed her the keys and the helmet. Jamie had the reputation of being a really mean person. Bye, Tex, see ya. I just nodded. Come on, said Jamie. I bet I can hit 60 between here and home. They only lived about a half mile away. You better not, called Bob. Big brothers are all alike. I almost felt like going to bed. I was so tired and achy, but it wasn't time to go to bed, so I picked up a Western Horseman magazine off the floor and crawled into the big chair to look at it. That put me right next to the kitchen wall, and I could hear everything Mason and Bob were saying. I hadn't planned it that way, but I didn't move either. Swear I could have killed him, Mason said. It was like I blew a fuse or something, and it wasn't my fault. Dang, Pop, he's the one who ought to be punched out. Gosh, I didn't mean to hit Tex like that. Well, he looks like he'll live. Forget about it, Mace. He will. I'm not so sure I wouldn't. You're not, Tex. You're not, Tex. Mason, we could have bought the horses. You know Cole is already looking for a way to get Johnny off that bike, and Jamie's going to start hounding him for one pretty soon. Yeah, sure, Mason said bitterly. You think I could take knowing you guys had our horses on top of everything else you've got? They were silent. I always thought the Collins couldn't help having a lot of money any more than we could have, or we could help not having any. But whenever Mason thought about it, it really hacked him off. Bob understood him as usual. You had to sell them, Mason, and you knew Tex would take it hard. You're going to have to quit brooding about it. If I hadn't sold them, they would have starved, or we would have. I am not going to quit school and get a full-time job. I'm not even going to get a part-time job till basketball's over. Basketball is my out. I'll sell anything I have to make it through this winter. I have to get out of here, man. Bob, I've had 3 different scouts talking to me already. If I can get through this winter, I can go anywhere. I went to bed, more to get away from that conversation than anything else. If Mason could get a good price for me, I wondered how long it'd take him to make out the bill of sale. Before today, I didn't really think he could go off and leave me here by myself if Pop didn't come home. Now I knew. He'd go so quick and make my head spin. And Pop? But he had to come home. He always had. He just forgot about how long he'd been gone. Anyway, if he knew Mason was gone, he wouldn't leave me here by myself. I couldn't imagine being here by myself. The house is colder than a frog's tail. I decided to sleep with my clothes on, which I do sometimes anyway, if I don't feel like taking them off. I piled all the quilts on top instead of saving one to sleep on, and a mattress button bit me all night. We didn't have any sheets. Sheets get torn up real fast, especially if you take a nap with your spurs on. I woke up at 6, just like always, pulled on my boots and jacket, and stumbled out the back door to the garage, where we keep the feed. I noticed we were low on grain, and thought about reminding Mason to get some. Then I went up the well-beaten path to the corral. It wasn't until I got there, wondering why nobody was nickering, that I remembered. I stood staring at the empty corral, shivering. The horses were gone. Negro was gone. I'd never find them. It was final. Once, a couple years ago, I got into trouble with the law. I borrowed a car that somebody had left the keys in. I took it back, but the people were waiting there for me. They let me sit in a jail cell a couple of hours to think about it before they called Pop. I remember seeing his face when he came to get me, almost like he had written me off, like I wasn't his kid anymore. I remember thinking, this is the worst thing that'll ever happen to me. And here I was, wrong.